live.
Okay.
So, yeah, like you said, it's the Columbia final mission.
Yeah.
One about space. So, do you want to give us a since Gina's not here, either you can give us a summary or I can do it. Either way is fine.
Okay. For the best I can. So it's about the Columbia space shuttle that exploded as it was coming back into the atmosphere. Um, they talked about here like what could have caused it to have that problem, and they were kind of going over different things that the crew and NASA and funding and
Mm-hmm.
stuff that could have caused the problem. So it was, I think, 8 people died. Is that the right amount? 7 or 8 people that are on the crew. So it, I guess it just kind of goes into like, what could have caused it or what things could have been done to prevent it from crashing. And that's basically what I got out of the case study.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. Did you kind of get the same thing?
Yeah, pretty much. They just kind of went like the last like half of the case is just kind of like a step by step each day, like each flight day, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like a big thing that they focused on was just like the foam debris, like hitting the ship.
Yeah.
I feel like that was the biggest like problem that they like focused on. So I wonder if that's what like the case was kind of directing us to, was to, okay, this is the reason why this happened or whatever, you know?
Yeah. So I guess the foam thing was like, so I put this as my, like, when you write the case, do you do it with like an introduction and you label it introduction and then you do problem 1 and then 3 to 4 sentences, then problem 2, 3 to 4 sentences?
Um, I don't know that I do like problem one, problem two, but I do like label introduction and then I kind of like I don't say problem one, I just kind of like write like a couple sentences and then like almost make them different like paragraphs or different
Okay.
bullet points. So
Okay. So yeah,
it
that
kind
was
of
my,
depends on the case though, because some of them have like a lot more to write about and a lot more.
yeah. So that was the problem 1 I put was soon after the Columbia took off, pieces of foam broke off from the fuel tank. The Columbia collided with the foam pieces. This created damage to the panels of the heat shield, which is vital for the shuttle's ability to re-enter the atmosphere at such high heat. So I guess that there's something they had noticed before where it was those had broke the foam pieces had broken off on other shuttles, but they never had a problem. So they had this kind of false sense of security, and it kind of they said, well, so nothing's happened so far, so it must be okay, and it was just a disaster kind of waiting to happen.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting, like just what you said, like nothing had happened before. That was kind of like their philosophy at NASA. Like, okay, well, if it got us through on this like trip, then it'll get us through on the next one.
Yeah, it must be the right way to do it if nothing happened.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I think there are people in like the whole organization that know better.
Hmm.
Like, they even just like made a team just to like study the debris
Yeah.
and like that situation for the mission. And so, like, obviously, like, it's a little bit more serious than they thought. So I think there should have been, like, better communication on, like, within the group to say, okay, this is, like, kind of dangerous. I don't know if we should be doing this.
Yeah. I think one of their that was interesting is one of their excuses for not making a big deal out of it is they said like, well, what could we do if it was a big deal? And it was like, well, that's like a horrible answer, but it's they I guess there was another space shuttle that was going to be going in after them that could have like tried to repair their ship before they re-entered the atmosphere, but they were just kind of like you said, that's never happened. Nothing bad's happened in the past. Let's just go for it.
Yeah. The other thing, I'm not sure there was any like people on the ship.
On the Discovery?
Yeah, I thought there were.
Yeah.
Okay, I must have missed that when I read it. Because when I read it, I thought they stopped sending people out into space in like 2003 or something.
Yeah, I think that. Let me double check that. I'm pretty sure people died. Let me double check.
Okay. I know like people died in other, like in different, like the Challenger disaster. I think 8 people died, or maybe less than that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it. Yeah, I think they had like what, 2, 4, 6, 7 people that died.
Okay. On the Columbia though?
Yeah. So it says. I'll just put who died. In the Columbia space. Okay, yeah. So if you put who died in the space shuttle Columbia disaster, it has like Rick, William, Michael McCool. So yeah, there was
So there were quite a few people.
there
Okay.
were 7 people that died. Yeah.
I just remember reading something where they like they tried not to send people out into space for a while. Maybe it was just like a period of time where they like were just sending like probes or satellites or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's after they had like Apollo, like during the Apollo missions.
Mhm.
People were really scared of sending humans into space, so they were sending like monkeys and weird stuff like that because they were like, you saw Apollo 13, like they always had like disasters and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So they were more cautious back then.
Okay.
But yeah, they got kind of confident after a while, and in 2003 they had like the space program wasn't as big, and people were wondering like, why are we spending money on the space program anymore? Like, what does it do for us?
Mhm.
And so they weren't getting as much funding as they were, and like the Discovery or the Columbia ship was 12 years old, so it was kind of a old ship in space terms.
Right.
But yeah,
That's the one that they said like they kept sending it out.
yeah. So it says NASA had begun using the Columbia shuttle since 1981, and this was 2003. So she's trying to get on.
Yeah. I don't know how to send a link.
On your Hangout page.
Uh-huh.
You see an ad. I don't see it here. Chat, showcase, Q&A, control panel.
I don't know if I did it wrong, but I went through YouTube.
Yeah, that should be right.
Okay.
Can you in your control panel on the side? Is there anything you can do?
Trying to see if there's anything. There's like a cameraman thing. Uh-oh. No, I can't do that. Oh wow. That's not the right thing either. Okay. Well, let's see. I don't know how to, like, if she goes into the thing, it should just be in there. Like, if you go just into Google Hangouts, is that what you did?
Yeah. So try to send her an invite again if you can.
Okay. Does it send an email to
If you
you?
go just into Google Hangouts, is that what you did?
I see her on now. She's in.
Okay.
So try to send her an invite again if you can.
Sorry.
Can
you guys hear me?
Back we were talking about her.
Ah, there we go.
Okay, yeah, we hear you and see you. Looks like you're got a new camera. Did you get a new camera?
Can you hear us? Uh-oh.
Okay, sorry. My microphone was turned off, or speakers. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry for being late.
It's all right. We're doing the space shuttle thing.
Okay, where are you guys at?
We just kind of have been talking about like some of the problems. We gave a summary already, and then we just started talking about how like the foam debris stuff.
Okay.
Do you have anything like you want to add?
Well, I'll just jump in from here on without
Okay.
really knowing exactly what you guys have talked about. I don't want to necessarily repeat anything. Let me grab my paper though. Hold on.
Okay.
What question are we on?
So I couldn't find any like questions.
Yeah,
Oh.
me either.
I saw something. It was.
Maybe it's just me, but I looked like everywhere I could.
Let me look really quick. I remember seeing something, but I didn't read through it all to see if there were any specific questions or if it was just the overview. I remember actually it had like sort of the answers on it. The format also. Hold on, let me see if I can find it again. So it was under content.
Is it under case? I always like forget where it's under.
I know, that's
like
the.
To it, it's just all. Oh, I think I found it.
I think it was under the instructions.
Yeah, it's under
No.
the case study activity. I never look at that, but I need to look at that one. Okay. So,
Okay, yeah, here it is.
okay, cool. So basically the first question is, what's the issue? And we kind of talked a little bit about that, but it says like what's like kind of what's the technical problem and then what's the organizational problem.
Okay.
So, sorry, go ahead.
Technical, that's talking about like physically the shuttle and the tiles falling off because of the debris damage, right?
Right.
Is that what that means?
Yeah, that's what I assume when I read it, like that. And then the organizational would be like what went wrong with inside of NASA and like where they're the different groups.
Yeah. I think as I was reading this was one of those, this was the first case study that I had to read parts of it more than once because I was so confused as far as who the people were and who they were representing or where they fell in that chain of command and everything. It was complicated just to read it. So with that in mind, I was thinking their chain of command was, first of all, there were so many people involved from all of these different departments within NASA that it was so complicated just from the very beginning. And I remember at the very beginning of the case study, they talked about how the organization itself was really kind of this matrix. I remember was one of the words that they used, this complex matrix. And while I can understand to some degree how, because it's the military and there are so many protocol issues that have to be taken into consideration, kind of the checks and balances within NASA. but it's so complicated. There has to be a way to streamline that so that at the very least, one of the biggest problems I thought were all of the independent contractors, and they had quite a few of them that were actually, well, by the end, or by I think it was the early or late 90s, if I remember correctly. By the late 90s, they had developed, or not developed, but kind of organized the, what was that called? That alliance, and it was Lockheed Martin and Boeing, how they started the what was that called? It was like the International Space Alliance or something like that, so that NASA wouldn't have to take the time to deal with all the independent contractors, that they could just go through this alliance. And they did that to help to try and simplify, to make it more simple, for NASA, and so that the people within NASA could really focus and concentrate on the technological development and research and everything. But it really complicated everything because it basically alienated, or it isolated all of those independent contractors so that they had no real direct contact with anyone within NASA that would be running the shuttle missions, or and so that was I think that's a huge failure in the organization of it. They need to bring that back in-house, I think, so that it reminded me of like the telephone game, how when you get so many people in this line of communication, by the time you get to the end of the line, the message is so distorted and so completely different than what was originally sent. That's what was happening in this, or at least with the Columbia mission. None of the real the emphasis on the damage that the debris had caused, and the severity of the issues that could have resulted from that, even made it to the top of the people who were in the roles to make the decisions on what to do.
Yeah, I saw that too with like the Department of Defense. They had so like I was using outside sources to help get solutions for the problems, and
Yeah.
one of them was the Department of Defense it's like a separate entity to NASA, and they have satellites that are up there that could look at the space shuttle and see the damage of it, but they like failed to communicate a bunch of times trying to get information on the satellite. And so, yeah, I think the communication aspect of it was a big problem. And I think it was a part of it was they just wanted to, they were like under pressure with this NASA program, and they were, it was like, what is this thing good for? And why are we spending money on this? And, it's 2003, nobody cares about this stuff anymore. And they were trying to still have relevancy. And so I'm sure they were more about just like doing it and getting it done, and nothing has happened in a long time. So, I think they kind of got lazy about it, maybe a little short-sighted with doing it. And, that's kind of what created that problem. Because they could have fixed it, I guess, if they looked at the shuttle and said, oh, this is damaged too badly, and we need to do something before. And they had a shuttle that was going to be going up right after them that they could have had go up sooner to help them fix the shuttle. So
that's what I was kind of unclear about. Was it supposed to be the Columbia again that would be turning around, or were they just talking about the turnaround time from when the Columbia would be coming back and another shuttle would be going up.
Yeah, so there was another shuttle that was going to be going up after them, but they could have like sped it up and made this ship go up sooner. Help fix the Columbia.
That's what I was confused about that. It kind of read like it was the Columbia that was going to be literally turning back around again to go back up. But then it wasn't making sense because I remember reading a part about how it took so long, you know, it was going to take, that they anticipated and planned on a certain degree of damage every time that they would fly because of the debris. So I was trying to figure, anyway.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure about that.
So I used a lot of outside sources too to try to come up with solutions. So I just kind of Google searched the Columbia disaster and saw
That's what I did too.
Yeah, that helped out a little bit.
Yeah, it did. A lot, actually, on this one.
Yeah, because it was so technical. Like you said, it was so technical and high level. I was like, I can't really answer or solve a problem about something I have no idea what they're talking about. So,
right. No, it's not like a normal business case. It's like a.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely different. So something that it asks is which kind of relates to what we were just talking about, like especially with sending up another ship, like shuttle. It's just like says, what was the recovery window in this case?
Recovery window.
See, I think that's what they're talking about then, what I was just asking. So there must be several months between when the Columbia would go back up again. That must be what they're calling a recovery window. From the time that a shuttle would return, and then they would have to make all the repairs from the missing tiles, from the debris, because that was very common. Like that, the fact that the debris had knocked off tiles or whatever, really didn't even faze them. So that was, it was so common, that they really didn't even think it was that big of a deal. But they didn't realize that the debris on the Columbia, when it actually struck the tile, it went through both layers of the tile. I guess there's two different layers, or more than one layer. It broke through all of them. But so the recovery time must be the period of time between when a shuttle comes back and they repair it and it's ready to go back up again.
Yeah.
Which I'm guessing just from the reading that it must be a couple months, because didn't they say they like the Columbia, and I didn't get this from the reading, it was one of the additional resources, but the Columbia, that shuttle had gone up, it was on its, was it 28th mission? I think that was the 28th mission that it had within that, about a 10-year period or something like that. So that's at least every 4 or so months ish. Anyway,
I think their goal, like at first, I remember it saying like they wanted to get them up like every 60 days or something, but then they couldn't like meet that standard, budget and stuff.
I remember reading that.
I think you're right. I think it ended up being like 4 months, like 3 or 4 months or something, instead of like 2 months.
Yeah, which is crazy fast when you think about. I don't know. That's really fast. That one thing that Greg touched on was there was definitely a different focus from the people that were higher up in sort of the NASA organization, and how I imagined this, and I could be totally wrong, but when they're in that command center, those people that were basically running the command center during the missions, those are kind of the go-to, the head guys, right? And then, but all of the other people that would have been outside of that command center were all of the people that had the real information in terms of what was really going on, what the damage, what they needed to look at in terms of really being able to analyze the severity of the damage. But there was such a disconnect between all of those people because they literally weren't able, because they didn't have clearance or for whatever reason, you know, they weren't in that room. There was this huge disconnect, and the people that were in the room, while they may have been, you know, during the mission, I would have to assume that they would be very concerned with everyone's safety. But outside that room, it was just push, 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 push in terms of meeting the deadlines and spending money. You know, budget was a huge factor in all of this because they didn't want to spend any extra money anywhere if they thought that it could be cut.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even like just getting the photos, it was getting additional pictures. I think that while it was definitely would have sounded like it was going to be a pain in the butt to get the clearance and get the right people, you know, it was definitely a financial issue too, because it would have involved a lot of man hours and, you know.
Yeah.
So
I thought it was interesting too is at the end of it, like the last page 10, where it's titled Columbia's Tragic End.
yeah.
The guy like still denies that it's like he doesn't believe it's because of the foam debris.
Yeah.
That was like kind of shocking to me because it just shows you like we put so much faith in, like you say, oh well, NASA, they definitely know what's going on, and you know, pride's not going to get in their way of being honest and practical about everything. But I mean, it still was. You had, you know, 7 people that were dead, and then everyone's looking to this guy and going, you know, what happened? And he goes, oh, it's not my fault. It's not my fault, you know. But
Yeah.
if they could look, you know, later on, they could look at the videos, everything. They could pinpoint exactly what the problem was, and that's exactly what it was those foam pieces breaking up.
Right. And what I haven't thought about this until now, but was he that guy who completely denied it in the end? Was he sort of that middleman in between the independent contractors and the guys who were doing actually the crash analysis, and then the people that were in the command center making the calls?
Sean O'Keefe was the NASA administrator, so he was the top guy.
But I mean, is he the guy? Because it was the lady who was actually making the calls, right?
Mm-hmm.
On whether or not to, you know,
you go
whatever.
to exhibit. Oh yeah, just the little exhibit that's sideways right below the.
Oh, I forgot about that.
It kind of gives a little pyramid. I don't know how to flip the.
Oh, so he really was the guy at the very top.
Yeah, that's Sean O'Keefe, and then has all the people in there that were in the program.
So that would be a huge red flag.
Yeah.
On an organizational level.
Yeah.
Huge red flag.
Yeah.
Because if he is that disconnected with really what's really going on, there's a problem.
I think he doesn't want to be blamed. You know, he doesn't want to be like, yeah, we screwed up. It's our fault. And, you know, we're cautious enough. You know, he has like the families of 7 dead people staring him in the face. So he's trying to deny all, you know, all
possibility. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think another thing, I just thought it was interesting, like, they knew that it was a problem. Like, somebody knew. There was that one guy that was, like, watching the video, and he gasped. Like, when he heard, like, the foam hit, he's like, that's, like, he knew that that was a problem, but nobody, like, spoke up because they're all worried about the cost and the, like, getting through the chain of command and everything. And so maybe that guy really just, like, didn't know that they actually were working on a solution. Maybe he just, like, like you said, maybe that's just like a huge problem within NASA that they don't communicate between the different like branches.
Yeah.
So this reminds me of, did you guys ever watch White Collar? Or have you ever watched that show?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the episodes, anyway, oh, actually, this wasn't White Collar. This was, anyway. But to go back to my point, there's a quote from, it wasn't White Collar, it was another lawyer show, but anyway, but it's his job to know. You know, it really, when it boils down to it, the atmosphere and the tone, I guess, in the whole organization really comes from the top. And if he doesn't know what's going on, then he's not doing his job. And if you know what I mean, like, and he's set the tone for everyone to just sort of deny and point the finger, and it's always someone else's. It's not us. It's not here. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, there are a couple questions that kind of go along with like this topic. So one of them says, and like you guys can kind of take them and like, I don't know, change them if you need to, like your answers to fit the questions or whatever, or the questions to fit your answers. But it says, tell me about the people in the case that were important contributors to this mission's failure, and who's accountable and why. And I feel like we're kind of talking about who is accountable, like this Sean, I can't remember his name already.
Sean O'Keefe.
Yeah, Sean O'Keefe. Like, yeah, he's the one that's like kind of should take the blame for all of NASA making the mistake. But like, who else is accountable and why?
Well, whoever was talking to the DOD is accountable. Let's see. So if you like control find DOD in the case.
Wait, so the DOD, like the Department of Defense, or the DAT?
The DOD, Department of Defense.
Okay.
What's the DAT again? Can you remind me what that is?
That's a debris analysis team. So they created that after the shuttle got hit.
Right.
And the Department of Defense is like the U.S. Department of Defense.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that the DAT really, of anyone in this whole mess, their hands are probably the most clean, because they're the ones that kept asking and pushing to get pictures and get more the information that they needed to make more accurate analysis. And every time that they were ignored, they always added after every report, or after all of their presentations for the analysis that they had been able to make up to that point with the limited information that they had. They always made it very clear that it was incomplete, that they needed more information, that there was still outstanding scenarios that they hadn't been able to run. And so I would say that of all of them, they're probably the most they did as much as they literally maybe could. I shouldn't say literally, but they did a lot in trying to move to go in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember who they reported to, though. Do you remember who they reported to? It was a guy, and then that guy is the one who reported to that female, and now I can't even remember who.
The female's Ham, right?
Yeah.
I just remember because I kept thinking, like, I don't know.
Okay, where is Ham? I don't even see her on this thing.
I don't know. It just like mentions her like so many times in the article though. So I remember her name, but I don't know. I think it's her last name.
Yeah, it is. But was she not even? Hey, Clay, was she not even really in this chain of command then, or was she just sort of the?
I'm wondering if she's like in the Space Shuttle Program office. Yeah, she's right there. Linda Ham. So it's like that big, so there's like the three
Oh,
people at the top, and then there's a big box right under that like um is a couple different people.
yeah, I see her. Okay.
So yeah, she's a manager of Space Shuttle Program integration.
Okay. Okay. Um, so I would say she definitely has some fault in this because she's the one who denied the getting the pictures because she couldn't trace who specifically had asked for it, which is understandable, but she should have dug deep enough until she found out where it came from instead of just sort of, oh, well, I've asked so and so and so and so, nobody knew, so it's gone, you know?
Mhm.
Um,
Are you guys like the bottom of page 8?
I'm just looking at the diagram,
Okay.
remembering, so I might not be going in order in terms of
My thing cut out. Did you hear me say Lambert Austin?
remind me
No.
who he is again.
So this is what it says here. So they tried to get images from the DoD 3 times, and for one reason or another, all 3 times they didn't get anything. So the first time was this guy named Lambert Austin, who was the Boeing integration chief engineer in the Space Shuttle integration office. He asked for a request for imaging of the Columbia while it was in orbit. So we called the DoD to determine to get the images, but
Oh,
he was not making a formal request.
that was the first time, right?
Yeah.
The first request to get more images. Okay.
Yeah. And then there's that Rocha person. The DAT included that Rocha should pursue this request through his own engineering division rather than following the shuttle program chain of command. So there was Rocha trying to email people. This guy named Shaq. Shaq was in this NASA program. His supervisor. And then the last one was Austin again trying to call this guy named Ham, but NASA canceled the request for images 90 minutes later.
Yeah, Ham's the girl that we were talking about while you were gone. Linda Ham. So yeah, she's pretty high up on the chain of command. But yeah.
Ham's high on the hog.
Yeah. She's kind of she's the manager's of Space Shuttle Program integration.
Mhm.
So she's like the fourth box down is that's what we were talking about, I think, right before you came back on.
Okay.
But yeah, I think she's responsible, and all those people, like, nobody was communicating what needed to get done. Like, I feel like nobody like went up the chain of command, but at the same time, like what do you do, like, in emergencies? Like, I think a lot of times, like, people just like forget the chain of command. They're just like, okay, I need this done. I'll start this, and then I'll go up the chain of command. Like, I'm gonna start the request just because it takes so long and things like that.
But I wonder if it had more to do with not necessarily. I wonder if it had more to do with the fact that because the chain of command was so complicated and it was so time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everything took so long to go up this extensive chain of command that, especially in a situation basically that they were in, kind of a crisis situation where they only had, you know, this 15, 16-day window to figure this out, that it wasn't even realistic to go up the chain of command because it would take too long. So I don't know if it was so much. I think it was very deliberate, is what I'm saying. I don't think it was necessarily oh, I'll just do this quickly. But then that kind of goes back to, do you remember the whole issue with was it the debris? No, I can't remember if it was the debris or the tile. The tile being broken. But anyway, they had said from the very beginning that people had gotten so accustomed to just breaking protocol and doing whatever they wanted to do that it was normal. Like they really, even though they had sort of the protocol, it didn't sound like anyone really used it. And then, interestingly enough, the one time that they kind of seemed like they put their foot down and said, okay, no more, it has to go through the chain of command, was probably the worst time they could have done that. And when they were saying, when I think it was Ham actually that said it too, that if anybody tries to go around us to get any pictures or to try to go around sort of the protocol, you've got to shut them down immediately, kind of thing. So it almost was kind of the nail in the coffin at that point. Do you remember what I'm referring to?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the point of this is this case is kind of point out the problems in communication within a company and how creating a lot of bureaucracy, and these not open forums create all these problems, and things get overlooked, and it becomes too difficult to communicate with one another when you have all these barriers to go through. So,
yeah,
even at the highest level where people's lives are in your hands, you gotta do certain things. So I kind of think that's where they're going with this case, is understanding the importance of having open communication and all that. I know in my work, like, I can't go above who my boss is or else they get really ticked off, But it's like, if my boss isn't doing it, then I have nowhere else to go.
So with that kind of leads into like the next section of questions, like what would be a good concept of like how to design a working team? Like how would you guys reorganize it so the team was working together and it was more like fluid in how they talked to each other and communicated with each other?
Well, you have to have all the different divisions because to some degree, you can't have, you have to have, it seemed like they needed to divvy up the responsibilities and having different departments, focus on their specific realm of responsibility within the, whether it be in the maintenance or in wherever they fell within the shuttle program. But I think the biggest thing, the first thing that I would do is simplify the chain of command, and I would do that by making it very clear. First of all, instead of having so many middlemen where you have, for example, the space, looking back at the Exhibit 1 on page, I think it's 10 or 11, looking back on that kind of that graph, instead of having all of these departments they have, so like, for example, you have the at the very bottom, you have the solid rocket booster office, and the reusable solid, and then the space shuttle. You have all these different departments, and they have to go through the space shuttle project office that then has to go through the space shuttle. You know, they have all of it's just this complex web. The first thing I would do is just simplify it by making every department go directly to one place, whoever that is. If it's the management, that big kind of square in the middle where Ham is, and I think it was Roche in there too. No, he was in a different department. But that's, I think, the first thing I would do is just really clarify exactly who you should be talking to, and it should be the same person for all of these departments.
Yeah, and it's a good idea. Have one person that all the information can be funneled through.
Yes.
Yeah, I also think like another thing that might help, and I don't know if like they would have time for this or whatever, but I think it would be smart to have like a quick meeting at the end of the day to say, okay, what does like, is there anything on the table that like needs to be addressed by us? Like the managers can meet with like the other managers of the other departments and just kind of be like, hey, like, is there anything that like we've missed, anything that's fallen through the cracks? Because I feel like it's like those little things that fall through the cracks that end up being like big problems.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that was probably one of the protocols, because didn't they say that they expected that analysis team, that independent and the team that was analyzing the crash or the damage, didn't I remember reading somewhere that NASA had expected them to meet like 2 or 3 times a day, but they ended up meeting like 2 or 3 times period, like over the whole 16 days or something.
Yeah, they met like every like 3 or 4 days or whatever.
Instead of 3 or 4 times a day.
Yeah.
So they, at the very least, I guess, then I would, because it sounds like some of their protocol needed to change, but some of it was in place and for good reasons. So they just needed to implement it and really stress and make sure that everyone understood that they were expected to do, because I don't think like that independent company that was analyzing the crash, it didn't even sound like they even knew that they were expected or that they should have ever been meeting more often. Or maybe they did, I don't know, and they just chose not to, but they might not have even known.
So, like, to go along with that, just as time's winding down, ask another question. So, like, what about, like, the psychological safety, like taking risks? Like, should the company have taken the risk of not meeting every day? Like, just like you said, like, what risks, where is it acceptable to take those, like, risks in protocol? Because I think there are some, like we were talking about, like some protocol, like you said, Gina, some protocol wasn't helping, other protocol like could have helped the problem. So like what do you feel like is like acceptable in those situations to like forego protocol? I guess, like what reasons? I don't know if I'm asking the question right.
Yeah, you are.
I think when you're dealing with people's lives, you can't really, there's not a lot of chances you should be taking. I think you have to, obviously you have to be streamlined and have things on budgets and things like that, but I don't think you can incorporate cutting corners and maybe neglecting some things, and when you have people's lives at risk. I think you just have to take it by priority. They hadn't had any explosions happen from this before, so I think they really put it low on their priority list, and even to the point where after it blew up, the guy still denied it. So it's hard to say because there's so many complex aspects to it. Like you see all the people standing at their desk, like checking off one by one if everything's going right. And there's so many opportunities for it to make a mistake. I could see that amount of information just can become too overwhelming for one person to not become sort of numb to after a while. So I don't know. I don't think there should be any real risks, or maybe you should delegate the risk and have like department managers, and those department heads inform one person. So there's, it's a little bit more manageable for people to digest and assess problems.
I agree with you, Greg. I think, well, clearly they needed to revisit their protocols to begin with. But after doing that and establishing what really is critical, when you're dealing in crisis situations like that, there shouldn't really be any deviation from protocol, because that's exactly what they're there for, particularly when it's, life and death that you're really talking about. So I would agree. I would say that there really shouldn't be any deviation from protocol. And if there would be any deviation, then it would be to follow another protocol specifically set up for crisis situations, if that makes sense.
So I have just a thought. Like sometimes I just I don't know. Have you guys seen Sully? That video, like the one with Tom Hanks? And like if he would have followed protocol, like he would have crashed. So it's like those kind of situations, I wonder if it's like okay to not follow protocol.
That's true. And had he followed protocol, all of those people would have died. Yeah, that's
my only thought about that. But like I agree with you. I think it's important to follow protocol and to have protocol for emergency situations. And I think NASA was lacking in that emergency situation protocol because they didn't even think that debris strikes, like the foam debris strikes, would be a problem at all. So they didn't really have a system set up to solve that problem.
Yeah.
But like I still think that in situations like that, you kind of have to go off experience. And I think that was the problem. Like nobody knew what to do because nobody had experience with it. Because they hadn't taken the time to research to find out if debris strikes would actually like jeopardize an entire mission.
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't know.
great point.
That's just my thought. So
I would be interested. They didn't cover any of this, but I think it would be really interesting to see where they have come from that now, where they're at now, having come from this, if they've improved.
Yeah.
Have you guys read up or have you seen anything about that?
No, but I wonder, like, I wonder too, because like they had that other problem. What was it? The Challenger disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't like. I feel like those were very similar situations. Like they didn't think it had never been a problem before, so they didn't worry about it. In the Challenger, like the low temperatures.
Yeah.
And I think it's like the same situation. So I wonder if twice, like that happening twice made them kind of stop, take a step back and like look at what they're doing, or if they're just continuing to kind of turn a blind eye to whatever works, you know?
Right.
But yeah, that's a good thought. If anyone does research that, let me know.
Yeah, me too.
So I guess we're almost done. Does anyone have any like personal experiences or anything like they read from the reading that like you could apply to this?
Hmm.
Are you talking, Greg? Sorry, I just saw your mouth moving.
Yeah, sorry. I guess the whole purpose of this case was to talk about the importance of like communication within an organization and how it can have bigger ramifications if it's not addressed properly. And all companies I've worked for have that same. They have like channels of people you're supposed to talk to, and I think the bigger the sliver, the bigger the organization, the smaller the channels are usually, because people don't want to be bothered with stuff. But I think when you have something as complex as this, you kind of need all those. You need that huge open communication with everyone. You can't do it like you would a regular job or or something like that. So that's all I think is you just need to create an environment where everyone understands what they're supposed to do, and there's no questions. There's no fear of asking questions or not understanding something properly, and people are able to do their jobs effectively. And it just kind of starts from knowing who they can turn to and what people they should be reaching out to. And but yeah, that's all I can think of.
I was remembering too that as you were talking, Greg, that I don't remember what week we had read this, but in that Speed of Trust book, they were talking about how important it is to create an environment where it's safe to make mistakes. And even though when you're dealing with people's lives on the line, a lot of the devastating things that had happened during this flight could have been avoided, perhaps, had people felt like they could really sort of learn from mistakes instead of just kind of covering them up or pretending they don't even exist. And that could have changed the whole outcome of this entire thing. Had way back when they were evaluating the integrity of the tiles. Do you remember that portion of the reading? It was towards the very beginning, and how they were talking about how a lot of the procedures that they would normally go through to sort of make sure that they were the best material that they could get, they just sort of skipped because it was time consuming and it would have cost more money. Even those mistakes could have been avoided, or even that situation could have been avoided maybe if people had felt like they could have gone back at any point in time after selecting the tiles that they went with and everything, and said, you know what, this isn't maybe the best. It's not holding up in testing like it should be, but everybody just always kind of zipped their lips and went on. So, yeah, I guess to wrap that back around, to just learn to make sure that you are you create an environment where people can learn from their mistakes. It really can be sort of for everyone's better at the end.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree completely. I think it's really important to like create that environment where like people aren't scared. And maybe that was a problem within NASA. Like people might have been scared to admit like blame um, for like something that happened or admit they didn't know what the problem was. And so I think, like you said, Gina, that's a really important in an environment to like have that like a way to communicate that, whether it's like anonymously, like or like in a setting where everyone's like constructive about it. But I think it's important to like I think people need to feel safe to talk about things like that they did wrong, or else people aren't gonna, especially in like a high risk situation, people aren't gonna accept the blame if like they're scared about losing their job, you know, or losing
Right.
so much stuff, you know. So, yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I think we're good on time. Any last comments from anyone?
Nope, I got nothing.
Got nothing.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, thanks for doing this. I'll try and email you guys the link. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
All right, see you later.
Okay.
And thanks for meeting later
Oh,
today.
no problem. No problem.
Have a good Halloween.
You too.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.